Imagine this: you're scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m., bathed in blue light, watching someone you've never met explain why they're blocking their entire family over a disagreement about dinner plans. The comments section erupts, thousands of strangers picking sides, diagnosing personality disorders, encouraging permanent severance of blood ties over what amounts to a scheduling conflict. You keep scrolling. A former friend announces they're cutting off toxic people for the third time this year. A coworker posts a manifesto about boundaries so rigid they've essentially built a fortress around themselves. A dating app match unmatches you because you took 4 hours to respond to a text. You close the app, feeling vaguely uneasy, but you can't quite name why. Now imagine stepping back further. Imagine you're an anthropologist from another century, observing our current moment with fresh eyes. What would you see? A civilization drowning in unprecedented material abundance, yet reporting record levels of loneliness, anxiety, and despair. A generation with infinite connectivity but vanishing community. People who've memorized the language of mental health and self-care, weaponizing therapeutic terminology to justify cruelty. Individuals who can articulate their trauma in precise clinical detail but seem incapable of tolerating the slightest discomfort from others. You'd witness a strange paradox: the more we talk about healing, the more fractured we become. The more we discuss empathy, the less we seem capable of extending it. The more we identify toxicity in others, the more toxic our own behavior grows. Think carefully about this question. What if modern society is not only failing to heal people, but actively producing more toxic personalities than ever before? This is not about blaming individuals. It is about understanding forces much deeper than personal choice. Forces that shape behavior, distort emotions, and quietly influence how people treat themselves and others. Stay with me because what you are about to hear will challenge how you understand human nature, relationships, and even yourself. And the final insight revealed later will be the most important and powerful of all because it offers a way out of this cycle. If you enjoy deep reflections on psychology, philosophy, and human behavior, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, share this video, and write your thoughts in the comments. What you will discover here may completely change the way you see modern life and the people around you. To understand why toxic behavior is becoming so common, we must first redefine what toxicity really means. Toxic people are not simply rude, manipulative, or narcissistic. At a deeper level, toxicity is a survival strategy. It is behavior shaped by fear, unresolved trauma, emotional deprivation, and social conditioning. Sigmund Freud observed that when emotional needs are suppressed rather than understood, they do not disappear. They transform. They emerge as anger, control, envy, or emotional numbness. Consider the contradiction embedded in our cultural moment. We live in an age that has given us unprecedented tools for self-awareness. We understand narcissism, gaslighting, emotional manipulation, trauma bonding, and 100 other psychological patterns our grandparents never had words for. We've democratized therapy speak, made mental health a mainstream conversation, and created elaborate frameworks for identifying unhealthy behavior. And yet, despite, or perhaps because of, all this awareness, we seem to be creating a population more psychologically fragile, more interpersonally volatile, more quick to wound and slower to forgive than any in recent memory. Walk through any comment section, any workplace conflict, any family gathering. Notice how quickly conversations escalate to character assassination. Watch how readily people deploy clinical diagnoses as weapons. Observe the speed at which minor disagreements transform into permanent estrangements. Count how many people you know who've declared someone dead to them over incidents that previous generations would have resolved over coffee and an awkward conversation. The statistics whisper what we feel but rarely speak aloud: rates of loneliness have doubled in recent decades. Trust in others has plummeted. The average person reports having fewer close friends than at any point in recorded history. Meanwhile, we've never had more books about boundaries, more podcasts about self-care, more influencers teaching us to protect our peace by cutting people out of our lives. Something has gone catastrophically wrong. But what? Is it social media rewiring our brains for outrage and performance? Is it economic precarity making us desperate to guard our diminishing resources, including our emotional ones? Is it the collapse of traditional communities leaving us untethered and defensive? Or is it something deeper, something philosophical, a fundamental misunderstanding about what it means to be human in relation to other humans? What if the very tools we've embraced to become healthier, the boundaries, the self-advocacy, the intolerance for discomfort, have transformed into something monstrous? What if in our rush to protect ourselves from toxic people, we become precisely what we feared? The answer isn't what you think. It's darker, more paradoxical, and more urgent than the simple narratives we've been sold. Because the truth is this, we're not just producing more toxic people. We're producing a type of toxicity that believes itself to be healing. A cruelty that calls itself self-care. A destruction that wears the mask of protection. And it's spreading because modern society has engineered the perfect conditions for it to thrive, conditions so invisible, so normalized, that most people never question them. Modern society is exceptionally good at suppressing emotions while pretending to promote happiness. You are constantly told to be productive, positive, successful, and independent. But rarely are you taught how to feel, how to process pain, or how to sit with discomfort. Carl Jung warned that what is ignored within the psyche does not vanish. It sinks into the shadow, and the shadow does not remain passive. It expresses itself through projection, hostility, and destructive patterns toward others. Think about how people interact today. Many conversations are not about listening but about winning. Many relationships are not about connection but about validation. Social media rewards outrage, comparison, and performance. It trains the mind to see others not as human beings but as mirrors reflecting your own insecurities. When a society prioritizes having over being, individuals begin to define their worth through external measures rather than inner integrity. This creates fragile egos that react aggressively to criticism and difference. Another crucial factor is chronic stress. Modern life places the nervous system under constant pressure. Financial instability, information overload, lack of rest, and the fear of falling behind keep people in a near-permanent state of fight or flight. Neuroscience shows that when the brain remains in survival mode for long periods, empathy decreases while impulsive and defensive behaviors increase. In simple terms, stressed people are more likely to become toxic, not because they are evil, but because their nervous system is overwhelmed. Ask yourself this: how many people today feel truly safe, truly heard, truly understood? When safety is absent, control replaces trust. Manipulation replaces honesty. Emotional withdrawal replaces vulnerability. Toxic behavior often masks a deep sense of powerlessness. Alfred Adler, one of the founders of individual psychology, believed that many destructive behaviors stem from feelings of inferiority. When people feel small inside, they may try to dominate others to regain a sense of significance. Modern society also encourages disconnection from meaning. Many people no longer feel part of something larger than themselves. Work feels empty. Relationships feel transactional. Life feels rushed and fragmented. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, observed that when people lack meaning, they fall into what he called the existential vacuum. This emptiness often expresses itself through aggression, addiction, or emotional cruelty. Here is a question worth reflecting on: if a society constantly rewards speed over depth, image over authenticity, and competition over cooperation, what kind of personalities will it produce? When vulnerability is seen as weakness and compassion as inefficiency, emotional armor becomes the norm. But armor, while protective, also prevents connection. Yet there's something even more insidious at play. Modern society does not merely tolerate toxicity, in many ways, it rewards it. Assertiveness without empathy is often labeled as leadership. Emotional detachment is mistaken for strength. Ruthlessness is reframed as ambition. Over time, you learn that to survive and succeed, you must suppress sensitivity and exaggerate dominance. Consider how early conditioning plays a role. From a young age, many people are taught that their value depends on performance. Grades, productivity, appearance, popularity, and status become measures of worth. When love and approval are conditional, the psyche adapts. The child learns that being authentic is risky, but being impressive is safer. Psychologist Donald Winnicott described this as the development of the false self, a social mask designed to secure acceptance while hiding the vulnerable core. As adults, many people no longer know who they are beneath this mask. And this inner disconnection often manifests as irritability, defensiveness, or emotional coldness. What you are beginning to see is only the surface. There is a deeper mechanism at work, one that explains not only why toxic people exist, but why even kind individuals can become toxic under certain conditions. The forces shaping this transformation are silent, pervasive, and far more powerful than most realize. Trauma also plays a central role, even when it is subtle. Trauma is not only catastrophic events. It can be chronic emotional neglect, constant comparison, or growing up in an environment where feelings were dismissed or punished. Neuroscience shows that unprocessed trauma shapes perception. The brain begins to interpret neutral situations as threats. This is why some people overreact, lash out, or shut down emotionally in moments that seem minor to others. Their reactions are not about the present moment but about unresolved past wounds. Modern culture rarely creates space for healing these wounds. Instead, it promotes distraction. Endless entertainment, constant notifications, and perpetual noise prevent introspection. Blaise Pascal once observed that much of human misery comes from the inability to sit quietly alone. In a world that never slows down, people avoid silence because silence forces confrontation with inner pain. When pain is avoided, it does not dissolve. It leaks into behavior, often hurting others. Another powerful contributor is moral confusion. Traditional structures that once offered ethical grounding, such as community, shared values, and long-term commitments, have weakened. While freedom has increased, guidance has diminished. Without a clear inner compass, people often adopt values that are rewarded by the environment, not those that cultivate character. Friedrich Nietzsche warned that when old values collapse and no new ones take their place, individuals risk falling into nihilism, where nothing feels truly meaningful. In such a state, empathy erodes because if nothing matters, neither do others. Toxic behavior is also contagious. Human beings are deeply influenced by social norms. When disrespect, sarcasm, manipulation, and emotional avoidance become common, they start to feel normal. Social psychologist Philip Zimbardo demonstrated how environments can dramatically alter behavior, even in psychologically healthy individuals. Put people into systems that reward dominance and punish vulnerability, and cruelty can emerge where compassion once lived. Think about workplaces where constant competition replaces collaboration. Think about online spaces where anonymity removes accountability. Think about relationships where people are treated as replaceable rather than sacred. Over time, this conditions people to protect themselves first and connect second. But protection without connection leads to isolation, and isolation breeds resentment. Here is a difficult but necessary question: how often do people today confuse self-protection with self-sabotage? Emotional walls may prevent pain, but they also prevent love, trust, and intimacy. Carl Rogers, one of the most influential humanistic psychologists, believed that people become destructive not because they are inherently bad, but because they are disconnected from their authentic selves. When authenticity is unsafe, toxicity becomes a substitute. Modern society also accelerates identity confusion. People are encouraged to constantly reinvent themselves, yet given little guidance on who they truly are. This creates fragile identities that depend on external validation. When validation disappears, anger often takes its place. This is why criticism, disagreement, or rejection can provoke disproportionate hostility. The ego feels threatened because it has no stable foundation. Now imagine something unsettling. Imagine that toxicity is no longer just a behavior but an identity. Imagine people no longer saying, "I acted this way because I was hurt," but instead unconsciously thinking, "This is who I am." This is where the problem deepens. Modern society does not only create toxic behaviors, it slowly convinces people to build their sense of self around them. Think about how often people define themselves through defense. I am cold because the world is cruel. I am harsh because softness gets you hurt. I am distant because attachment leads to pain. These beliefs do not appear overnight. They are learned responses to repeated emotional disappointment. Over time, the mind begins to equate emotional numbness with safety. The tragedy is that what once protected the psyche eventually imprisons it. Where have you seen these patterns play out in your own life, in others, or in society at large? Have you noticed moments where stress, fear, or insecurity transformed someone kind into someone harsh? Awareness of these dynamics is essential because without understanding the roots, any attempt at change remains superficial. What comes next will reveal the psychological mechanisms that keep these patterns alive, even when people suffer from them. Carl Jung described this process as identification with the persona. The persona is the mask you wear to adapt to society. It is useful but dangerous when mistaken for the true self. When someone fully identifies with their mask, they lose access to their inner life. Empathy weakens. Self-reflection fades. The individual becomes rigid, reactive, and easily threatened. This is not strength. It is psychological armor fused to the skin. Modern society accelerates this fusion. There is little room for emotional repair. People move quickly from one relationship to another, one job to another, one identity to another without integrating their experiences. Pain is not metabolized, it accumulates. And unintegrated pain seeks expression. Often that expression is control, criticism, manipulation, or emotional withdrawal. Consider how shame operates beneath toxicity. Shame is the feeling of being fundamentally flawed or unworthy. Unlike guilt, which says, "I did something wrong," shame says, "There is something wrong with me." Psychologist Brené Brown explains that shame thrives in secrecy, silence, and judgment. Modern culture, with its constant comparison and exposure, quietly amplifies shame. People measure their behind the scenes against everyone else's highlights. The result is a fragile self-image, constantly under threat. When shame is activated, people defend themselves instinctively. Some attack, some dominate, some belittle, some detach completely. These are not random behaviors. They are protective responses. The toxic individual is often someone who learned early that vulnerability leads to humiliation or abandonment. So they preemptively harden themselves against others. Another powerful mechanism is emotional illiteracy. Many adults were never taught how to name, understand, or regulate emotions. Feelings become overwhelming because they are unfamiliar. Anger becomes the default because it feels more controllable than sadness or fear. Neuroscientists have shown that when emotions are not labeled, the brain struggles to process them effectively. This is why people sometimes explode over small things. The reaction is disproportionate because it carries unrecognized emotional weight from the past. Modern society does not correct this. It encourages emotional suppression rather than emotional intelligence. People are praised for staying strong, moving on quickly, and not dwelling on feelings. But suppressed emotions do not disappear. They shape tone, body language, and interpersonal dynamics. Over time, relationships become battlegrounds where unresolved emotions are unconsciously reenacted. Ask yourself this: how many conflicts are really about the present moment? And how many are echoes of past wounds? When people cannot separate who hurt them from who is in front of them, toxicity spreads quietly and persistently. There is also a loss of initiation into adulthood. In many traditional cultures, there were rites of passage that marked psychological transformation. Today, many people grow older without ever growing inwardly. Responsibility is assumed, but maturity is not cultivated. As a result, emotional reactions remain childlike even in adult bodies. Entitlement, impulsivity, and emotional avoidance become normalized. The philosopher Martin Heidegger warned that when individuals live only on the surface of existence, absorbed in distraction and conformity, they lose touch with authentic being. This loss creates anxiety, and anxiety when unexamined often expresses itself as hostility toward others. Here is a crucial reflection: toxicity often feels powerful in the short term. It creates distance. It creates control. It creates the illusion of superiority. But in the long term, it erodes trust, intimacy, and meaning. People surrounded by emotional walls eventually feel alone even when they are not physically isolated. This loneliness then reinforces the belief that others cannot be trusted, completing the cycle. But here is where the breakthrough begins. What if everything you've been told about protecting yourself is incomplete? What if the walls you've built to keep pain out are the very structures keeping growth locked inside? The rebellion against toxicity does not start with changing others, it starts with dismantling the fortress within. It starts when you realize that the armor protecting you is also suffocating you. Which of these patterns feel uncomfortably familiar? Not to judge yourself, but to understand. Awareness is not condemnation. It is the beginning of freedom. What comes next is the most important turning point of this entire discussion, the revelation that can genuinely transform how you relate to yourself and to others. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Viktor Frankl spoke these words from the depths of unimaginable suffering, and they contain the most important insight of all, the one that transforms everything discussed so far. The one modern society rarely teaches yet desperately needs. Toxicity does not end by fighting toxic people. It ends when individuals reclaim responsibility for their inner world. This is the turning point. Most people believe change happens when the world becomes kinder, slower, or more just. But history, psychology, and lived experience all reveal a harder truth. External conditions influence you, but they do not determine who you become. What truly shapes a human being is the relationship they have with their own inner life. Modern society produces toxicity because it teaches people to outsource responsibility, blame the system, blame childhood, blame trauma, blame others. While these factors explain behavior, they do not excuse remaining unconscious. Carl Jung emphasized that individuation, the process of becoming whole, begins when a person stops projecting their shadow onto the world and takes ownership of it. Until then, people remain trapped in cycles of reaction. Here is the profound shift: the opposite of toxicity is not niceness. It is consciousness. Consciousness is the ability to pause, observe, and choose. It is the capacity to feel pain without immediately discharging it onto others. This is not weakness. It is psychological strength at its highest level. Modern society conditions people to react instantly. Notifications, arguments, outrage, and conflict reward speed, not depth. But every toxic pattern thrives on immediacy. When there is no pause, there is no choice. Viktor Frankl survived unimaginable suffering and still concluded that meaning is found in how we respond, not in what happens to us. This principle alone dismantles the foundation of toxic identity. You are not your circumstances. You are not your trauma. You are not even your thoughts and emotions. You are the awareness that witnesses all of these, and in that awareness lies your freedom. Another essential element is emotional integration. Healing does not mean erasing pain. It means metabolizing it. When emotions are acknowledged, named, and processed, they lose their destructive charge. This is why self-awareness is not a luxury but a necessity. Without it, people unknowingly pass their wounds forward. With it, suffering can be transformed into wisdom. Think about the people who've hurt you most deeply. Now ask yourself, were they evil, or were they unconscious? Were they malicious, or were they operating from unprocessed pain? This is not about excusing harm, it is about understanding its origins. And when you understand the mechanism, you gain power over it. You stop taking it personally. You stop mirroring it back. You break the cycle. Modern society also needs a redefinition of strength. Strength is not emotional numbness. Strength is the ability to remain open in a world that encourages closure. Philosopher Hannah Arendt warned that thoughtlessness, not hatred, is the root of much human cruelty. When people stop reflecting, they stop seeing others as fully human. The moment someone becomes a category, a narcissist, a toxic person, an enemy, they cease to be a person. And once that happens, cruelty becomes easy. Meaning plays a decisive role here. People anchored in meaning are far less likely to become toxic. Viktor Frankl observed that when individuals know why they live, they can endure almost anyhow. Meaning stabilizes identity. It reduces the need to dominate, manipulate, or belittle others. A meaningful life does not require superiority. It requires purpose. This brings us to an uncomfortable realization: toxic people are often those who feel internally lost. They are disconnected from purpose, from self-understanding, from genuine belonging. When inner emptiness grows, it seeks compensation through power, control, or validation. The solution is not punishment or rejection but conscious interruption of this cycle. And here is where the deepest truth emerges, the one that will either liberate you or disturb you, depending on how ready you are to receive it. You cannot heal the world by becoming harder. You can only heal it by becoming more conscious. Every time you react with anger when someone triggers you, you are perpetuating the very toxicity you claim to oppose. Every time you cut someone off without reflection, you are repeating the pattern. Every time you dehumanize another person, even if they've hurt you, you are feeding the cycle. This is not about tolerating abuse. It is about recognizing that your response to toxicity determines whether it spreads or stops with you. The quiet revolution happens in the gap between what happens to you and how you choose to respond. It happens when you feel the urge to lash out but pause instead. It happens when you notice your own defensiveness and ask, what am I really protecting? It happens when you stop demanding that others change and start examining why their behavior threatens you so deeply. Modern society may continue to produce pressure, noise, and confusion. But it does not get to decide who you become. That decision happens internally, moment by moment, choice by choice. When enough individuals choose awareness over reaction, responsibility over blame, and meaning over ego, the culture itself begins to shift. This is the quiet revolution. No algorithm promotes it. The transformation does not trend. The work happens within. And yet it is the only force powerful enough to heal what modern society has fractured. Ask yourself this final question and answer it honestly. In moments of tension, do you react automatically, or do you pause and choose? That space between stimulus and response is where toxicity dissolves and humanity returns. You have been given the map. The journey from toxicity to consciousness is not easy. It requires relentless self-honesty, emotional courage, and the willingness to confront the parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. But it is the only journey worth taking. Because at the end of it, you do not just escape toxicity. You transcend it. And when you transcend it, you become something rare in this world, a person who does not add to the chaos but diminishes it. A person who does not reflect cruelty but absorbs it and transforms it. A person who, in the face of a toxic world, chooses consciousness. Which insight challenged you the most? Where do you see this transformation beginning in your own life? Your awareness matters more than you realize. And remember this above all, a conscious person in an unconscious society is not weak. They are rare. And rarity is where true power lives. The choice, as it has always been, is yours.